Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and I'm joined by always Jeffrey Benedict, film guru extraordinaire, laughing at me for my early flub. Jeffrey, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Mike. I'm having a. There, I messed up your name. There we go. We're even. Great show tonight. Yeah, I'm doing good.
Nothing but the best here at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. But we have a special guest with us as we break down the Steelers draft. Tonight we have Jeff Tarpley from 24/7 Sports joining us to break down the two players from Texas A&M. Jeff, how are you doing?
Doing great, guys. How are y'all doing tonight?
Oh, just wonderful. I guess just getting right into the action here to really kind of look at left tackle Dan Moore first. Can you just talk a little bit about his game and how he is as a player?
Well, both of these guys are really interesting stories because you're talking about a couple of three-star players from a recruiting class, at least by A&M standards and Jimbo Fisher standards, that wasn't the most highly rated at the time when they all signed. And in fact, though, this class went on to drive the Aggies to their highest postseason finish since the national championship team of 1939. Moore was a three-star coming out of high school. He was actually rated as a guard coming out of high school. And everybody knew he kind of needed some work, and that was, for most guys of his ilk, it's like, hey, maybe you got to shed some pounds, maybe you got to bulk up a little bit, develop some foot quickness, that type of thing. He worked really, really hard in the summer prior to enrolling at A&M. And as a result, when he got to fall camp, he was in much, much better condition and much slimmer than he had been when he arrived in College Station. As a result, instead of being maybe the project that everybody thought he would be, that, hey, look, we got to take a redshirt year, we've got to develop this guy's technique, we've got to have him learn the college game, we got to reshape his body. He stepped in and became a backup right away. And not only that, he became a backup at offensive tackle. And at the time, A&M had guards on its roster. What they really lacked was tackles. And so they were able to slide him outside. He actually started a game as a freshman at right tackle. But he was basically the backup left tackle for most of the season. Eventually, the guy in front of him, Coda Martin, moved on to Syracuse. Dan moved into the starting lineup as a sophomore, was a 3-year starter. And I think you'll see this with both him and Buddy Johnson. They're great guys, and they have a great work ethic. And they got, we talk about guys, how they just kind of plateau, maybe they never get better. These two guys definitely got better during their time in College Station, even though they didn't always have the same coaching staff. Jimbo Fisher didn't come in until both of them were into their second year at A&M. Dan Moore went through, actually both of them went through a couple of position coaches. So for Moore, at least, he steps into the starting lineup, and he, at the time, he wasn't the quickest guy foot. He hadn't played on the edge necessarily like a lot of guys his age had. He had a tough go of it, especially when you look at the defensive linemen that came out of the SEC during the 2018 and 2019 seasons. I mean, it was a bunch of first-round draft picks, all SEC guys, and the SEC is the type of league where, while everybody kind of gives the attention to Alabama, I mean, there's schools like Mississippi State, for example, that aren't recognized programs, but nonetheless, they still crank out a ton of talent. So Dan had to face the best of the best during his 3 years. Well, by his senior year for him, he had not only gotten better from a technical standpoint, he had gotten more confidence in his game, but he also wasn't facing necessarily just first rounder after first rounder after first rounder like he did during his first 3 years on campus. He's bigger than the guys he's facing. He's more experienced. His pass sets have improved. You'll notice if you watch him over time, his pass sets, they get a little shallower. He's able to get out with his kick step a little bit better. He's able to anchor. He doesn't give away as much of his chest as he did when he earlier in his career. Hand usage got better. He really worked hard at his craft. And so as a result, you've got a guy that everybody, especially when he's a sophomore, was like, hey, why don't we switch Carson Green, who's the right tackle, with Dan Moore? Because Carson Green had more length, probably had better footwork. And everybody's like, well, why are they playing one guy on the better pass blocker on the right side and then the better run blocker ostensibly on the left side? Well, by the time they were seniors, Dan Moore is the one that winds up getting drafted. He had the better Senior Bowl, and that's not a knock necessarily on anything that Carson Green did. But nonetheless, Moore was just stronger. He understood how to position himself better, used his hands better. Again, he played with better leverage. Sets were better. He set up quicker, all those things. And so by the time he's a senior, he's not only an SEC, all SEC caliber guy, but all of a sudden he's someone that you're talking about as a possible NFL draft pick. And to be honest with you, not everybody projected him as an NFL draft pick a couple of years prior to that, or if they did, they projected him as a guard. So for Dan Moore to be able to do what he did, come to College Station, come to A&M, improve like he did, to play the left side in the toughest conference in all of college football, and to become an all SEC caliber player as well as a mid-round draft pick, I really think that says a lot about him.
Yeah, you say he's grown a lot in his footwork and his development and everything. What is his biggest thing that you look at now and say when he heads to the NFL? To play tackle in the NFL, what does he still need to work on the most, would you think?
I still think he probably needs to work on the lateral movement. Even before the draft, there's people talking about him as a versatile player, someone who can play on the interior as well as on the edge. And I think that stems from the fact that not everybody trusts his agility as much as they would like to. I think they kind of see the struggles that he had to an extent when he was a younger player. He's going to have to get acclimated. All the guys that left are going to be waiting for him now in the NFL. So he's going to have to kind of get ready to deal with some of those guys all over again. However, if he can do that, you've got a guy that's going to continue to work to get more agile, to work on that kick step, to work on getting those hands up, to work on getting position, to make sure he doesn't give away the interior so that he loses leverage, all those kinds of things. One of the things that, one of his advantages in the fact that he did play in a West Coast pro-style type of offense where he's having to make blocks in an intermediate passing game, which with the spread, you're not necessarily having to do that on a lot of teams. The routes are different. And although A&M runs spread concepts, they run air raid concepts, Kellen Mond threw a lot of intermediate routes last year. And those routes take time to develop, and they take time you have to hold your blocks in those instances. And so guys like Dan Moore in A&M's offensive line last year developed from the standpoint that they learn the patience of not giving everything away right at the snap, to be able to have confidence in what they were doing, make the other guy work for what he's got to be able to do to get around him, not give up the inside, use their physicality. And so he's going to have to take some time to do all that. And maybe his best position is on the interior. That's one of the things we're going to have to wait and see. But I think from his standpoint, he may not be ready to go right out of the box, but he's certainly a guy who you can see working his way into the depth chart early on as a fourth-round pick and maybe someone who eventually moves into that starting lineup, not necessarily at that left tackle spot, but certainly at least on the interior.
One of the things the Pittsburgh Steelers really needed to work on this offseason, something that even the owners specifically says they need to fix the rushing attack. The new system that's kind of being implemented, you can kind of hear from some of the language from some of the players that it's hyper aggressive and they want to get after blocks and play more smash mouth Steelers type brand of football. Is Dan Moore someone who's aggressive in the run game, someone that is just a nasty run blocker?
A&M was a big-time inside zone team last year, and that meant that not only were, I think zone blocking kind of denotes maybe finesse with that term, because you're thinking about drive blocks, you're thinking about man blocks versus zone blocks. But the way A&M did things, the inside zone really made that offense go last year. They talk about how good that offensive line was. They led the SEC in rushing average, for example. That was because they were able to double team defensive linemen. They were able not, most of the time what you're wanting to do with those combo blocks is you're wanting to get someone off of the first level defender and get them to that second level defender, to the linebacker. And with A&M, it was more of a case of, no, we're going to come off the ball. We're going to come off of it hard. We're going to double team you. We're going to double team you into the second level. We're not going to necessarily have to work our way to the second level. And so what that meant was you had, let's say, center guard blocks where they're moving a nose and they're moving him, and it's very, very difficult for that second level player to get there. Well, then you've got the offensive tackle, a guy like Dan Moore, being able to come off the ball, out-position the defensive end, get to the second level of the linebacker, out-position to the defensive end, get those feet turned, get after that defensive end, turn them, and be able to make that running game go. It was a very, very physical offensive line for last year for A&M in that regard. Another thing they did really well was counter, and especially did they did the pull. They would pull two guys from the opposite side of the formation. Most of the time involved tight end, but they also would pull a guard. They would pull a tackle like Dan Moore. Those guys really learned to, the guys that weren't pulling learned to seal their blocks, dominate the line of scrimmage, or at least stalemate it. So the footwork on the pulling guys behind them, they could stay on track and block the right guys. And that was another thing too, as far as Dan Moore and everybody else from A&M last year. They did a really good job of targeting people. In fact, they did a really good job of that even back when Moore was a sophomore and a junior. They didn't make they made mistakes, but they learned from their mistakes. And in 2020, they really didn't make a whole lot of them. I think they also led the SEC in tackles for loss allowed. Usually you're turning the wrong guy loose, you're blowing a block, that kind of thing. These guys didn't do that. Again, Dan Moore playing the hardest position on the offensive line in the hardest conference in America. And he's not only able to drive people off the football in the run game, but he's also able to check them in the passing game and give a lot of security to Kellen Mond, who played for A&M on the left side. And keep in mind something else too. A&M only allowed 3-4 sacks all season. They led the SEC in sacks allowed. They did that and way it benefited Kellen Mond was used to kind of getting pressure. His 2018, 2019 in A&M kind of caused some questions about him going into the 2020 season. He answered those in spades because he was able to get the type of protection that he'd always lacked. Dan Moore was a big part of that on that left side of that A&M line. They didn't make any mistakes. They knew how to pick up blitzes and stunts. And as a result, Dan Moore, even if he doesn't make it as a tackle, you're talking about a guy who's used to doing all those things and used to dealing with pro-style terminology to be able to pick up on things kind of quickly so that when they run a stunt, they run a blitz, he's got the right guy in hand. Now,
you mentioned pulling different linemen. did Texas A&M pull Dan Moore much? Did he show much? I know you said his lateral agility probably needs to be worked on, but in positions where he's either pulling or up at the second level, or like extending the play, blocking, is he mobile in that way? Is he a good guy that they could pull out and use, like even in screen games, stuff like that? Like how does he do when he's outside of the line moving around?
He was really good. A&M ran a lot more of what you would call a traditional screen back when he was a sophomore. They kind of got away from that in 2019 and 2020, but he was really good at that. And for a guy who, hey, everybody's like, well, maybe he's not the fleetest guy in the world. He understood where he needed to be, and there wasn't a lot of wasted motion with him. And it was the same kind of thing when he pulled as there was in the screen game. You're talking about a guy who knew exactly how to step. I was an offensive lineman way back in the day, exactly how to pull, step back, not step too far back, be able to maneuver, if there's any traffic, maybe somebody gets pushed back, stay on course, get to where they need to go outside, outside of that, outside of the B gap, and know who they, if somebody's pulled ahead of them, who to pick up in terms of the first defender outside, second defender outside, where they're expecting that guy to be at, how to knock them out of the gap, how to turn up field and push them back to the inside to create those running lanes. So yes, again, he's not the most athletic guy when he pulls, but he's a guy that really is able to get the job done because he understands where he needs to be and how to get there.
To flip over to Buddy Johnson here, could you tell us a little bit about the middle linebacker and how he kind of he played in the center of that defense and kind of led that unit as a member of Texas A&M?
Well, Buddy's a fascinating story because he didn't arrive at A&M as anything resembling a Mike linebacker. When he signed with A&M, he's only about 200 pounds. In fact, in high school, he played quarterback, he played running back, I think he played some linebacker, I think he played in the secondary. He was kind of all over the place. He had good speed, he had good size for that classification of ball. He played down in high school ball down in Dallas, and so he was able to play a multitude of positions. But everybody said, hey, look, when you get to college, you're a guy that's probably going to have to play linebacker. So he gets to college, and A&M his freshman year, they stick him at the Sam, which really these days, the Sam is kind of a holdover from someone, again, and this is dating myself, way back in the ancient days of football. You lined up over the tight end, and you kind of dealt with those guys, strong side of the formation. Well, the Sam's kind of gone by the wayside because everybody tends to use maybe they'll play a tight end on the line of scrimmage. But now these days they'll play an H-back, they'll play a slot in place of a, traditional 21 or 12 personnel look. So he was a Sam linebacker, and he actually gained weight. He actually showed up at A&M heavier than what he was on signing day. A&M's like, hey, look, this is great. Let's stick him at the Sam. He's got, they could play him in space in John Chavis's 4-3 look that they used back in 2017 when he got to campus. He was very functional there. He played in 11 games. I think he actually was in the starting lineup for a couple. He's someone that impressed everybody with the fact that, hey, he's smart, he's dedicated, he can run. He was undersized. He was young. He didn't have great protection necessarily. A&M had lost some guys like Myles Garrett, Deshaun Hall, both of whom went on to play in the NFL. Of course, Garrett's with the Cleveland Browns, one of the best defensive ends in all of the NFL. So he didn't quite have the protection he did during the 2017 season, didn't have the size that he would later on. 2018, he moves in more of a reserve role, starts the bowl game that year when Atero Alaka, who is one of A&M's starting linebackers, goes down. He steps in, plays very well in the Gator Bowl versus NC State. Then in 2019, it's his job, Mike linebacker. And you're talking about a guy who gradually got bigger he starts out at 200 pounds, leaves. He's listed at 240, I think, at one point, 235, maybe 240 at one point during his career. Combine, pro day, he's weighs in at 230 pounds. Gradually adds mass. But it doesn't really slow himself down. He's fanatical about staying in shape, about getting bigger, but maintaining that speed. He's also fanatical, like Dan Moore, about getting better in terms of learning his craft, learning how to play off his blocks. He's got that SEC C-gap to C-gap kind of body, so they can step up, take on blockers, shed them, or stalemate runners in the A and B gaps. He's also a guy who learned how to read blocks. He got better over time, so that and A&M's defensive line also got better over time. You know, A&M had a couple of NFL draft choices in 2018, Kingsley Keke and Dalen Mack, providing protection for those guys. 2019, they had guys like Bobby Brown, who was drafted by the Los Angeles Rams in this draft. You know, you start getting some guys in there. Jaden Peavy, who is the other starting defensive tackle, 6'6", 295. Brown's 325 pounds. In fact, A&M's kind of stacked nose tackles under Jimbo Fisher, where they had 4 guys listed at the position this year that were all 325 plus. So he's starting to get protection. He's starting not have to take those blockers on at the second level because they're too busy dealing with the defensive tackles and defensive ends that A&M has. He's learned how to shed blocks. He's learned how to read blocks. He's learned how to, maintain his run fits, be where he's supposed to be, but he reads those blocks. And when those gaps open up due to the blocking, because they're trying to deal with the defensive lineman, he learns to shoot those gaps. He got much, much better at playing downhill, getting tackles for loss. If I remember correctly, he led A&M in total tackles his 2 years. Not only that, he was the guy that always put it upon himself to make everybody else better around him. Even though he wasn't, by the time his last year at A&M, he's not a guy he's more of a SEC Mike than he is, let's say, a Will who's going to be hanging out more in space. Nonetheless, he was a very, very good run defense linebacker. But he made everybody else better around him. He got everybody else dedicated to learn, getting into the weight room during the offseason, making themselves better. He's sacrificial. He said, hey, whatever I've got to do to make the people around me better. If I have to do something so the other linebacker can make a stop, that's great. He made a couple of really big plays. Junior year, Ole Miss turns that game around, 62-yard fumble return for a TD. That kind of turned, that game too, that was a game that came in the middle of the season. A&M was 3-3, just lost to Alabama. They wind up 8-5, and even though they were unranked, that was a game, Ole Miss game in Oxford, could have gone either way. Johnson picks up the ball, goes 62 yards with it for a touchdown. SEC Defensive Player of the Week due to his efforts. As a senior, he had the big fumble recovery on Florida's last possession. They're driving to set up A&M's game-winning drive. That not only turned around A&M's 2020 season, so to speak, especially after the loss they had the week before to Alabama, but it also, it turned around that game, turned around A&M's season. They win 8 straight games after that. And even though Johnson never got the type of postseason recognition that even Dan Moore did or a lot of the other guys did, everybody knew that A&M's run defense, by the way, I think they rank second in the SEC in run defense behind Georgia. That run defense was keyed by Buddy Johnson, who got everybody lined up, did his job, and made sure that, hey, look, when I've got to make plays, C-gap to C-gap, I'm going to be able to do it, especially in terms of his run fits. Just a very disciplined guy who plays physical, plays downhill.
When he is in pass defense, is he a guy who you're going to man up on a running back or a tight end, or is he a guy that thrives more in zone where he's reading and reacting to what's going on around him?
He's probably better in zone at this point. Most guys these days, most defenses these days, with the linebackers, nickel personnel, they're going to, everybody plays a version of that. man match type of coverages that Jimmy Johnson brought into, he popularized at Miami, brought into the NFL with the Cowboys. Nick Saban's really popularized it at the college level with a little different look than what Johnson used. So he's a guy that if you sit there and go, if he could read his route, if he can read those routes and understand where the receivers are going, he's not necessarily going to get the jump on those guys, but he's at least going to be in the area and be a deterrent. One problem is that especially teams like Florida, for example, they got really good at running things like shallow cross, and a lot of other teams do too. But Florida really ran shallow cross well in that game against A&M. What they would do is they would sit there and catch the attention of the other linebacker, and then they'd sit there and bring another guy across. Well, Johnson's not, the other guy's not where he needs to be. Somebody else isn't where they need to be. And all of a sudden, the guy has an advantage. Johnson's chasing, and it's not necessarily because he screwed up. It's just simply because someone else out there wasn't exactly doing what they needed to do. He's a guy that, again, he's going to understand route combinations. He's going to understand if this slot goes over here, then this guy is going to come into the vacate area. And so I need to I need to wait for him. Or maybe if the slot goes somewhere, hey, look, I need to go with them as well. His athleticism isn't ideal for pass coverage on the one hand, but on the other hand, I will say this. He did work very hard at it. He got better, like Dan Moore did. He got better at it during his time at A&M. And he was really good at his pro day in terms of the agility drills, his 40 time, which shows that maybe if he, I think he got down to 229 pounds for pro day, that if you maybe get him down a little bit in terms of his mass, that he might have a little more agility, a little more speed, and be able to maybe make more plays in that regard than what you saw at A&M.
Last question for you here, Jeff. Do you think Buddy Johnson can be an every down type of linebacker, or is he someone better suited to be a sub-package type guy? What's his ideal role in the next level?
I think it's kind of a wait and see. I think we're sitting there looking at Dan Moore going, hey, look, let's wait and see in terms of how he develops, where he's at in a year or two, perhaps, whether or not he's a guard or a tackle. Again, he was able to play tackle at A&M. Most people think he'll be able to play tackle at the next level. He might wind up being a guy who's kind of a utility guy, able to play up and down the line. I think the same kind of holds true for Buddy Johnson. I think we're going to need a year of him being in the league, seeing where his ideal size speed combination is for today's NFL offenses, and where he needs to be from a weight standpoint in order to make himself the best player he can be. Because is it going to best serve the Steelers' purposes if he's a 2-down backer or if he's a 3-down backer? Again, I think that's a wait and see scenario. I think let's give him a year. Let's see where everything shakes out. I think one way or the other, definitely early on, he's going to be a guy that contributes on special teams. He's going to be a guy that you can plug in the middle of your run defense on early downs. And eventually you're going to figure out how good of if he's someone that you can leave out there on the field on passing downs as well and become that true 3-down linebacker that everybody hopes he can be.
Jeff Tarpley, thank you so much for your time. Of course, 24/7 Sports. Is there anything you want to plug on your way out?
Hey, join us at gig'em247.com. We're into the off season right now, but recruiting is kind of 24/7 as far as college football goes these days. A&M's about to start having on-campus visitors for the first time in a long time. We're through all that. NCAA started to allow those guys during the summer. On-campus camps are coming in. Things are a little different now as far as college football recruiting. You can evaluate kids on campus even. So we're going to have a big June in terms of covering all that. And of course, I'll be around to talk about those guys, the guys that A&M, gets commitments from, the guys A&M's targeting, about what they bring to the table in terms of what A&M does schematically in terms of the rest of their personnel. And I also have daily profiles going up, lengthy daily profiles on what just about everybody on A&M's roster brings to the table as, hey, look, for A&M football, it's a big time. You're talking about a program that hasn't had a lot of big success other than, let's say, recently with Johnny Manziel. Now you're talking about a program that's definitely in the top 10, probably on the cusp of the top 5. And as Jimbo Fisher talked big about Nick Saban and Alabama. That's the game of the year, October 9th, and we're already getting people talking about that. So, hey, join us for all that. We'd love to have you.
Awesome. Excellent analysis, Jeff. Thank you so much for your time once again. We had a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, our pleasure. So for everyone listening on the podcast platform side, you can go ahead and click over to part 2 now. As for everyone still joining us on YouTube and Facebook, just hang tight. Jeffrey and I will continue on after our little momentary break here, breaking down the Steelers beginning OTAs and what it means moving forward. So just a couple seconds. We will be right back.
Guys, again, thanks so much. Really appreciate you.
Our pleasure. Thanks for coming on, Jeff.
And like I said, I do read y'all's stuff. I really do. I've used it, last 3 years, especially as A&M's had more and more guys. You guys do a good job of breaking down the draftees. I think you guys broke down Kellen Mond in addition to I think he took a look at Dan. I'm not sure you took a look at Buddy. I think you guys took a look at Dan. And so I try to grab those and bring them to everybody's attention with little articles and everything and do the links and stuff. And so, like I said, you guys do a really good job in that regard and appreciate the content that we're able to share with our subscribers.
Hey, it's our pleasure. Thank you for being such a fan of our content. It's really is our pleasure to put that stuff out. So once again, thank you. I think Jeffrey and I are going to jump back into OTA stuff now. So
Awesome.
We'll wish you well. Have a great night.
Same to you.
See ya. All right, ladies and gentlemen, time for the second half of the curtain call. Once again, my name is Michael Beck, joined as always by Jeffrey Benedict. Jeffrey, what do you think of the two Texas A&M guys? Are you excited about their presence, or are they two guys that you were expecting to go in the 4th round, or what's your kind of vibe on these two guys? Oh, I think you're muted. There you are.
I'm good. Okay, I unmuted. Sorry. I'll start with Buddy Johnson. I think he did a great job talking to Buddy Johnson, and really, some people in the live chat were saying it, but he sounds like a more athletic version of Vince Williams. And that's what we were saying on this show. What do the Steelers need? They need Vince Williams, but more athletic. And so this young guy is going to come in and be that kind of a player, right? He's that kind of a player, and he's going to have Vince Williams. And I have no doubt Mike Tomlin's like, Vince, like, get into this kid's head what it means to be a Steelers linebacker. Someone did an article talking about it, and they talked to Vince Williams about it, about what it meant and when he first came to the Steelers, what was taught to him by veterans, by former players. And they had quotes from people like talking about how Vince Williams is kind of carrying that Steeler linebacker attitude of just go in there and be like the biggest dog on the field, be that dude that just goes in there and takes the will out of the other team. I think you're going to see Mike Tomlin pull Vince and say, hey, get that into this kid, because he has that ability. He has that kind of mentality. So I'm excited. I love the idea of him because he is the guy we wanted. Like we didn't know about him at the time. We weren't really into Buddy Johnson, but as we look into him, he is exactly what we wanted the Steelers to get for that inside linebacker spot. So I'm excited about him. I don't think he'll be, a big time player in his first year, but I think he is the future to go along with Devin Bush, and it's a very exciting tandem. Those two, the idea of those two right now. As for Dan Moore, I gotta agree with him. Like I gotta agree with him also on that one. Like Dan Moore is this guy that's got wonderful traits that you like. He's got a temperament that you want, but there's stuff he needs to work on, right? So you're gonna have to get him in, coach him up, give him a shot.
Yeah, exactly. If you just have the guys in the right scheme, I think that's really all you can ask for. Before we continue on, though, I I really want to go back, take a step back here. Just your genuine thoughts. Are you at all a fan of the Pittsburgh Penguins and hockey in general?
Yeah, I'm a much more casual fan.
Right.
Like I get crazy into stats and film with football. Hockey, I just like to watch a game.
Now, of course, for everyone listening at this point, you probably already know the Penguins have been eliminated from the playoffs. So I do apologize from the bottom of my Canadian heart for that. But do you think the city is a little snake bitten right now when it comes to playoffs? Because of course the Steelers, they've only won 3 playoff games this past decade. The Penguins, of course, they won a couple cups, but since then have struggled a bit in the playoffs. Do you think the city's snake bitten, or do you believe in curses?
I wouldn't say it's a curse. I think, the truly special teams and the truly special players are kind of hard to come by. The Penguins got a little spoiled with, 4 top 3 picks in 4 years there with Fleury, Malkin, Crosby, and Jordan Staal. I think more than anything, we're kind of spoiled in Pittsburgh with everything but baseball. And yeah, it's just kind of normal. Like, the guys get older. The players that really fit with these guys are gone. And you got stars trying to rebuild. You're trying to rebuild something that's fleeting. It's constantly moving on, and guys are constantly getting older. Players aren't what they used to be. Letang and Malkin, they're not the guys they used to be, right? They can't do it all season. So for me, this is kind of what you get. This is what you get when guys start getting older.
You know what? We'll get back to football here, but I will say, being a fan of the Vancouver Canucks, it could be a whole heck of a lot worse. You could not be watching playoff hockey at all. That seems to be the plight of my hockey team. But yeah, I guess the big news of the week, of course, we're in organized team activities now. Basically, there's a few storylines that are worth the following. Is there one that jumps off the paper right now to you that you're most interested in watching over the course of these kind of padded, I use air quotes, but padded practices?
What I find interesting is there's no receivers. Like, you're watching,
didn't show up.
Got film of like Ben Roethlisberger there, and he's throwing. Who's he throwing to? Oh, it's another running back. Oh, it's the backup. It's another depth tight end. Like, he's throwing the ball downfield to guys that aren't wide receivers. It's cracking me up. It's OTAs. It is what it is. And I guess when you really don't have, all your wide receivers were here last year. There's no rookie. So, they can pretty much do what they want. They don't have to really show up. But it's OTAs. More than anything, they're on the field, right? For me, this is actually happening. We're getting news that the NFL is going to be at full capacity for the whole season. Like, it's absolutely phenomenal to me. And I absolutely love that it's really back. Like, football is really back. We're going to have an actual off season. And that's huge to me for this season. It's huge because we didn't have it last year.
We got a super chat here in the live chat from Double H, who puts $19.99 in the tip jar. Thank you so much for that. That's a huge tip. He says, for a long-suffering Canuck fan and his co-host who has to listen about it. Hey, when we get off air, there's a lot of me complaining, so Jeffrey definitely deserves that. Double H, if you have a question, make sure to throw it in there. I'll get to that as well. I guess kind of one of the storylines that I've kind of been watching since the start of OTAs, Najee Harris, he's getting a ton of coverage. When you look across really all the rookies in the NFL, I'm not sure there's one player that gets post more than Najee Harris when you're looking across social media or any form of media, really. He's kind of the name everyone's just been jumping towards. But what do you think of Najee Harris? Is this the Najee Harris show? Is this the preview of a player that's about to go on an offensive rookie of the year type tear? Or is this an exciting time? Or what's your vibe with Najee Harris in OTAs?
Najee Harris is the star of this show. He really is. Ben Roethlisberger's in his 800th season. everyone's, I guess the luster's really off after last year of the offense. Like, it's crazy to think that when we spent a lot of time as an offense that was scoring a pretty good amount of points until we weren't. I should caveat that we were for a while and then we weren't. An offense that showed promise and then really fell apart, I guess is the best way to put it. No one from that offense really looks good right now. No one's there. You're not sitting there looking at any of them saying, that's the dude. That's the dude that we're excited to see this year, is how that player develops. No, it's all Najee. It's all Najee Harris. Like, we've got to get back to the run game. Okay, run game was just awful last year. Worse. I mean, we were 32nd, but it was worse than that. As I like to tell people, we were top 10 through 5 weeks. So not only we were the worst, we were bad enough the worst that we dropped from top 10 to the worst in 11 games. We were there before the 11th game, before that last game too. It was bad. So he's the guy. He is what we're going to watch. If Najee is running, then mission accomplished. We have a run game. And that's the key we've been looking at to get Ben to play better. When does Ben play better? When we have a run game. When there's a threat pulling those linebackers up into run defense a bit. Well, now he can throw those routes that he couldn't throw last year because linebackers were starting to, 6-7 yards off the line of scrimmage because he was just being like, "Hi, you can't run. We're not even coming up there. We don't care." So yeah, I really think he is the biggest. He might be the biggest draft pick in fan expectation and in excitement since Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, anyone else bigger than him in that time? I don't think anyone has been this exciting in that time.
Yeah, and with Najee Harris and his kind of brief couple practices, we've got to see some clips. I will say the offensive skill player outside of Harris that has looked kind of like jumped off the paper the most thus far is Anthony McFarland, who, like, when you're watching some of these drills, he looks really fast, which is exactly the kind of change of pace back I think you'd want to have when you have a Najee Harris in front of you. Are you expecting a bit of a step here in 2021 for Anthony McFarland, especially being perhaps the RB2?
I think he fits that, like what you want. Like you said, I think he really fits the change of pace you want for Najee Harris. And Matt Canada's taken over the offense. McFarland, when in his one season at Maryland, he started off playing wingback. He was doing jet sweeps, and he was a receiver. He was catching passes downfield. The Steelers threw a downfield pass to him on, what was it, a 4th and 1? Something like that. They threw, it was like a short yardage. Yeah. And they threw downfield to him. He's going to see that. Like, if he's the number 2 running back, he's going to get action in this offense. He will get some plays. He will get some stuff drawn up for him, because if he has that speed, he's a mismatch. And now he's had a year in the NFL. Last year, I can't even imagine trying to transition from, the end of the season he had, where he was banged up at the end of the season, McFarland, of his college season. And he goes in to the pros, and there's no OTAs. There's no training at the facility. You're on your own. You got like your rookie signing bonus, but that's it. That's the only money you've gotten. Like, it's going to be hard for those guys, especially in a new town. You've got to find people to train with. You've got to find stuff to do. To have a whole season to be in Pittsburgh, know the offense, know what he's getting into, and have an actual real season to train and prepare. I think this could be a very big season for Anthony McFarland. I could see him having a pretty good jump.
I guess to play devil's advocate on that side, as long as Mike Tomlin is the head coach, I'm not going to suggest that the running back 2 is going to get too many carries. It just goes kind of against his core beliefs, really. And since Le'Veon Bell, even James Conner, if there's been a bell cow back, they're getting the ball, and they're going to get it a ton. Would you agree with that, or would you still say Anthony McFarland should take off this year?
I think you're going to see a little bit of a difference, because what you saw with like Le'Veon Bell was when they put in D'Angelo Williams, you had to change your run blocking. You don't want to do that in the middle of a series. You don't even want to do that. Like, okay, this series, we're going to run block differently. And then next series, we're going to run block for this other guy. And then we're going to switch back. Like that's rough to do on an offensive line. So we saw mostly like Le'Veon Bell and D'Angelo Williams both would have good numbers, but it was because Bell would miss some games. And then the offense would change. Like they'd change how they blocked. With Connor and these other guys, they're too similar. Like Benny Snell and James Conner, they're too close together. For me, Harris, if McFarland is making plays, he's going to keep getting the ball. He's going to get chances. If he is not gaining yards, if he is not making the most of his chances, then you're not going to. Right? It's like last season, Benny Snell, when he comes in as a change of pace guy or as a backup, he doesn't do well. In games where he carried the ball like 10 times or less, his average was like under 2 yards per carry. When he carried it more than 15 times, it was pretty good, for how bad our offense was. It was pretty good. It was up there with James Conner's numbers. So he wasn't that guy. They tried to let Anthony McFarland be that guy. It didn't work out in year one. We'll see year two. But I think it all depends on the value you're getting from him. If he's gaining yards, if he's making plays, he's going to get a chance to play. We saw the same thing in 2019 when Kareth White would come in, and when it was Benny Snell and Kareth White would get carries because he was bright. He had the speed, and Benny Snell, did not. So it worked, and they would use both of them. So I think he's got a good chance to get some decent carries while Najee is playing.
You mentioned Benny Snell. Of course, the way this kind of running back room is kind of shaping up, it seems like he'll probably be the definitive third back. Do you think there's a chance he doesn't even make this team, or is this the end of the line for Benny Snell, or are they going to keep him around just to be a depth piece?
I think Benny Snell is pretty much a lock, partly because we're going to be running a lot of inside zone. And even outside zone, Benny Snell's a zone runner. So I think he will fit with Matt Canada's run style a little better than he did with what we were running under Andy Fichtner. Because James Conner and Benny Snell had different kinds of reads. And none of the offense really fit what either of them did well. So I think Snell fits better what Matt Canada does. So he would be kind of the Najee replacement. Like if Najee's missing a game or they want to limit his carries, then it's time for good old Benny Snell football.
Benny Snell, Benny no Jets, as one former BTSC host used to say all the time. But anyway, when it comes, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second here because we didn't discuss this, but in kind of the spirit of a surprise cut, would you say there's anyone on this team that you could point at and be like, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy didn't make the team after training camp, and someone that could potentially either be playing a decent amount or could be on the chopping block? Is there one name that pops out to you
as a potential cut?
Yeah.
As much as I just said, I think he's a lock. It would be Benny Snell. If anyone's going, that's who I would expect to be the one to go. But in my mind, that would take some serious game from Jalen Samuels or Kalen Ballage, really stepping up and kind of taking that job from him, and then he's expendable.
I think if I had to give you a name, just because of how many defensive linemen the Steelers have added, maybe Chris Wormley. Of course, he just got that 2-year deal, but they drafted Isaiah Loudermilk. Who knows what the guys behind him. It seemed like he got that deal more specifically because Tyson Alualu didn't originally get one from the Steelers. That's why I kind of saw them going right back to Wormley. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I'm not really banking on too many surprise cuts, but like you said, Snell could be one, or perhaps if some crazy free agent that we weren't expecting to come down the pipeline, I suppose if that were to happen, then they might be in the mood to move off of someone to bring someone else in. But with those moves, it's more of a wait and see thing. One of the bigger storylines, though, here in training camp, or OTAs rather, excuse me, Ben Roethlisberger showing up and going through all these reps. Do you think this is a big deal? Should we make something of this? Because this isn't typically something Ben Roethlisberger would be showing up to.
Yeah, I think he saw last year how he didn't have, chemistry with his receivers. He didn't have that developed. He could skip OTAs, come back, and throw the ball to Antonio Brown. Like, it didn't matter. Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger for several years there probably could have skipped most of training camp, showed up week 1 and torched teams. And then all of a sudden, he's gone. You've got, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, and Chase Claypool, who Ben hasn't thrown much to any of those guys before last season, much at all. And there's growing pains there, and there's drops, and there's issues with the game. So I think you're seeing Ben Roethlisberger realize, you know what, I have the opportunity now to have this offseason, and he's kind of seen the value of it last year when they didn't have it and how much it cost them.
The other quarterback in camp right now that is drawing a lot of attention, of course, they're all there currently at OTAs, but Dwayne Haskins, his first time wearing black and gold to practice, stepping on the field. What are your thoughts on him? Like, have you seen any clips of him throwing the ball, or are you excited about this guy? Could the Steelers actually have something here?
I am not going to be excited about any quarterbacks during like drills. Like, if you can't throw a ball down the field to a receiver who's not covered and who's just running, like, if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be in the NFL. I mean, Devlin Hodges could do that fine. Paxton Lynch looked good when he didn't have defenders on the field. Yeah. So I'm not going to get excited about quarterbacks till preseason. I am incredibly excited that we still have 4 preseason games. We got that extra game in a season where we have Dwayne Haskins, because he's going to get some serious time. And I always hate it because at the end of the games, it used to be the Steelers at the end of the preseason game, you get Landry Jones in there, and it'd be like, well, are we going to see? Oh, you get excited, be like, oh, maybe one of these depth wide receivers is going to be something, and they didn't even have a chance to catch the ball because Landry Jones was terrible. And then we now have legit guys. They can, at least in preseason, they can be like dominant. In the fourth quarter of a preseason game, Dwayne Haskins and Mason Rudolph, they both have wins as starters in the NFL. If either of them is played in the fourth quarter of a preseason game, they should be lighting people up. So I'm excited for that. That's going to be fun. It'll just be fun.
I agree. And it's going to be one of those battles that I think are going to be really fun to just watch throughout training camp. When it comes to position battles, though, what are you most excited for as we kind of move through this offseason process and get through mini camps and eventually training camp? What are the most exciting training camp position battles?
Cornerback. I'm very excited. I talk him up all the time, but James Pierre, I really want to see what he can bring in his second season, because his film from his first season was incredible. And, obviously NFL offenses will get to see what he did, maybe figure out where his weaknesses are. Maybe it was a little bit of, we'll test this guy, but we don't really know what he's good at and what he isn't. So we'll just kind of avoid him. But he looked good. I want to see him play. I want to see how that plays out in those contests, because that's actually for playing time too. Dan Moore is a big one I'm watching, because, man, I want to see him play, because Chuks Okorafor, what you're getting in the run game with Chuks, right? He's a decent kind of outside zone blocker, and that's about it. He's passable. It's like Kelvin Beachum. You're going to get what you get from him. It's not terrible, but it's not the guy you want run blocking out there at tackle. So Dan Moore puts a lot of hope in this team if he is a tackle, and he is a guy that can actually, either be the swing tackle this year and then take over next year, or even come in at some point in this season and kind of take that job. Dan Moore is a big one. Kendrick Green too. I think he's going to win that, but that is an actual battle, him and BJ Finney. So that's another one.
Oh, and Hassenauer, but I'm kidding. I see a lot of people in the live chat bringing up the the sarcastic laugh. I love that. I see a lot of people in the live chat bringing up the punter battle. If Presley Harvin third doesn't win that job, I would be befuddled. Goodness me. Outside of that, I think I'm excited to see how the wide receivers kind of jimmy themselves in terms of what position they will play within the receiving core. I think there's a lot of reason to believe it's kind of still up for grabs what spot each guy will play, just based on the way some of the receivers are talking. So that will be something I'm excited in watching. Outside of that, there really isn't too many position battles. Of course, you got, I guess, that third quarterback slot, whether or not Dwayne Haskins is someone the Steelers risk on the practice squad or what have you. So I guess that's kind of interesting to watch, but there really isn't too much other than what you've already expressed. I guess to move on for possibly the last question of the show here, I'm thinking more specifically about the second-year players. They're kind of getting a little bit of love here, especially today on social media. Those being Chase Claypool, Alex Highsmith, who obviously came into in a camp jacked out of his mind. I had a story around on the website today with Alex Highsmith putting on some mass. Then you got Kevin Dotson, who also looks shredded for a guard. He looks ready to take over the starting duties. And then, of course, Anthony McFarland, like we talked about earlier, who looks impressively fast in camp, as well as some other guys. Carlos Davis, Brian Anthony Davis's illegitimate son. Then the safety that I can't remember. I'm blanking on the name of the safety. No, from the year before. From
Brooks
Maryland.
Jr., Anthony Brooks Jr.
Antoine
Brooks Jr.
We got there. We did it. I'm proud of us. Good for us. Which second-year player is going to take the biggest step in 2021? It took a while to get there, but we got to the question.
Ooh, the biggest step.
Yeah.
Ooh, because Chase Claypool is gonna be phenomenal. But he had 11 touchdowns last season,
including rushing. Yeah, like 11 or 12.
That's like it's hard to take a step up from that. Like it's legitimately difficult to take a significant step up from a double-digit touchdown season. So I'm gonna go with Alex Highsmith because he is definitely stepping up, and he's gonna produce over there. He's gonna be a productive player.
I would agree with that. You're not getting like sexy stats out of a guard, even though I think Dotson will be
Dotson's gonna be a beast.
Like you said with Claypool, like touchdown wise, it would be really a challenge for him to improve on what he did. I think yardage and reception wise, I think he'll take a step, but Alex Highsmith is due. He's going to play a ton. And obviously he's in better shape. Not that he wasn't in bad shape last year, but I think he'll be better against the run. We know he's got a litany of pass rush moves. I think he could also take a pretty substantial step forward in 2021. But as we approach the top of the hour here, Jeffrey, is there anything you want to plug before we sign off?
Actually, can I divert the show? You mentioned the wide receivers and positioning. I want to throw this out really quickly here. They're talking about Juju Smith-Schuster playing on the outside more. And what that immediately triggered to me was watching Matt Canada's system in his offense. He uses tight ends, running backs, wing backs, fullbacks, and smaller, faster slot receivers, like a guy like at Pitt, Quadri Henderson, in that slot receiver role, which is very different than what the Steelers started doing under Todd Haley, where the Z receiver kind of was Richard Mann will always say the Z receiver becomes the slot, slides into the slot, and there's a guy that goes outside of him, like a James Washington or Martavis Bryant would go outside of Juju. Even when Randy Fichtner took over, that's gone. That's not going to be how the wide receivers work in Matt Canada's offense. And so you're probably going to see Juju running the Z and that not turning into the slot. That guy staying out there. So that's going to be a very interesting change to this offense. Is Deontay Johnson in the slot? How is that going to work out? I'm a big fan of Chase Claypool being the X receiver. We used to use Antonio Brown there, but I think Chase Claypool was at his best in that spot. and, kind of Deontay Johnson in the slot moving around a bit more. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I did want to bring that up because it is a different way these wide receivers are going to be used. And it is going to be interesting when they actually do show up for mandatory mini camps to watch how they line up, what they're doing, what kind of routes they're running, because this is a different offense and it's going to use those wide receivers in a little bit different ways.
That's just great stuff. Outside of that, though, is there anything you want to plug? Give that back to you.
No, we just dropped Dave and I just dropped a Vertex on the inside linebackers. Last week we did, comparing Avery Williamson at the end of the season with Devin Bush. Wasn't the most fair comparison to make for poor Avery Williamson. He wasn't that bad, but he's not Devin Bush. This week we're talking about the guys. We talked about the guys across from Devin Bush, Robert Spillane and Vince Williams, comparing them, what they bring. So check that out. It's always good. And I'm doing some pieces on Canada's offenses from college, where I'm just taking a single play and breaking down what he does. I've got another one coming this week. I don't know when. I've actually got to do it. Maybe early next week. Who knows?
And we will love it when that content gets here. Aside from that, I just want to remind people to click over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Of course, it's OTAs. We're compiling a mega list of all the stuff that's dropping every single day. So make sure you're clicking over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com and getting that roundup. Outside of that, the last thing I want to remind people of, make sure you're checking out the secondary AM shows. You can find those wherever you get your classic podcasts from, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Pandora, what have you. We are running a contest where there is an article on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com explaining all the rules, but basically you are waiting for a secret code, some music plays, and you have to listen to every single AM show from Monday to Friday this week. That's the 3 Let's Rides, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday version, my live mic from Tuesday, and Dave Schofield's Stat Geek, which of course drops on Thursday. So make sure you're checking those out and getting that secret code. You could win some sweet free merch from Breaking Tees and Behind the Steel Curtain. So make sure you're locked in for all of that and get yourself some sweet Steeler stuff, which we all know we need more of being Steeler fans. But with all that being said, my name is Michael Beck, and for my co-host Jeffrey Benedict, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.